Welcome to Thrive in the Mess. I'm your host, Lisa Hutchcraft Whitmer. So, hey friend, welcome to Thrive in the Mess. Today we are jumping into a messy topic, parenting. Lots of messes, but this is a place with no guilt today with parenting. We want you to know you are not alone in any season of parenting. And I have an amazing friend of mine. Her name is Lisa. So I have known Lisa for a long time. We have seen our children grow up together. And so you have two Lisas today.
Right?
So welcome to having two Lisas. And we're just going to we've been through all the situations, not all the situations, but all the seasons of life. We're going to try to touch on some different ones from baby through empty nest. And you actually have an empty nest, but with a 14-year-old.
Right.
Because you guys had another one.
Right. We joke that we have a pubescent teenager in a home with two empty nesters. So...
That's awesome. So we're just gonna kind of jump in. I will tell you. So I asked my younger son last night. He's here right now, and I said, "So Blake, what did I do well as a mom? Just like one thing." And he's studied philosophy. He's a thinker, and the first thing he said was, "Too late to learn from feedback now."
Oh my gosh.
Wow, thank you. And then he said this. He said, motherhood is made up of hundreds and thousands of small actions. Not one thing makes or breaks it. I was like, oh my goodness, that was like powerful. And then, so like you get a little teary at a moment like that. Right. But then we go into some other thing. But then he said this, which I appreciated. Long-term sustained effort is motherhood. There's good days, there are bad days. He said, what matters is your average day. And those are the days we sometimes get lost in as a mom. Like, okay, I have a pile of laundry to fold. You know, the sink is full of dishes. Right. The Legos we've stepped on for the thousandth time, you know.
Right.
But he said, what do you like on that average day? Well, I guess there were some days where then he said, talk about thriving in the mess. I evidently did not pick him up at car rider line. I'm like, that was one time. He's like, was it? He's like,
right? You're like, I picked you up thousands of days and you remember one.
I remember like being in car rider line and like taking work or a book or something. Because a lot of car rider line was before phones and all that. So I wasn't like online or... You know, so he said, the first day, I think you were on time.
Oh, my God.
And I said, well, what did I do well? He said, when you asked Dad to pick me up from school. I was like, oh, my goodness. I was just absolutely dying laughing. But I take hope that maybe some of the average days added up somehow. Because those are the things we really, as a mom, feel like we're not making a difference. We're at home, we're nursing our child, we're doing another bottle, we're doing the diapers, we're wiping bottoms. We think our children will never be potty trained, which was so me. You know, we started potty training our oldest, and then I was expecting our second son, and I was so sick. I couldn't keep up with it. I literally, everything was not just nausea, but like the throwing up part of all the things. So TMI, but you know, we literally put it on hold until his next birthday. Right. So we waited. We're like, we can't be hit or miss on this. You kind of have to be all in. And you know what? That was our family choice. So some of that is some of our theme today of, you know, every family. We have, you know, the parents, and we choose things like you and I. Even we would have done things differently, but you and your husband, Rick and I, like we end up making choices for our families. We are the parents for these children who God has put in our life, and we're the ones who have to make those choices. And we can't. I'm not saying don't listen to other voices, but we have to have boundaries and, you know, draw the lines, because even our parents love us. They love our children. You know, I know there are some cases where that's a little more traumatic for people, but overall, we can't we can't always listen to all the voices
Right.
because we have to make those choices
Yes.
for our child, and every child is unique in a family. And then, oh my goodness, nowadays there are like parenting experts galore.
Right.
I would have drowned. We can drown
Right.
just
Yes.
online with all the stuff. It's not just books. Like we had books, but online you can see a meme about this. I mean, so the other day on Instagram, I see two memes, and I was like, oh, I need to think about this one. But the first one I saw said, mothers of sons have more stress. Well, not long after, I saw one that said, mothers of daughters have
Right.
more stress.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
That's kind of a sign
yeah.
we can't listen to all the things.
Right.
Because
Right.
there's going to be a study about this and that.
Right.
And you know what? We know our child. We're the
Yeah.
mom. We're
Right.
the dad
Right.
who God has put in that role in this family. So through talking with our spouse and really praying and seeking God for each situation is what we need to do.
Right.
Not listen
Right.
to all the things because it's just an avalanche.
Right. Right. And one thing that I have thought about is that there's a huge difference between information and wisdom. And so,
That
but
needs to be a wall plaque
all
somewhere.
right, right. And one thing that we have always kind of lived by in our family, and our kids know kind of our motto, is that we are choosing to live differently so that we can live differently. And
Right.
so
See, this is part of why I love having you as a friend.
there's just choices that you make at different points that are going to be different even than your siblings or your
Right.
parents chose or even your friends. And you just say, this is a choice for us because we're choosing to have a different outcome at some point. And
that's okay.
Mhm.
Sometimes
Yes.
I feel like I when I see a parent like on a plane with their child and they might be crying or something, I'm like, kudos to you for traveling
Right.
because some people don't. And then they miss out on those experiences. And your child may be crying, but they might end up being a traveler someday.
Right.
Or just even when they're out doing whatever out to eat. Like we were out to eat recently, and there was a child walking around and near our table, and we just told the parents it's so great you go out to eat because it is teaching a
Yes.
child.
Right.
But I think sometimes we come down on children because they're children. They're a child.
Right.
They're not
Right.
us. And and sometimes usually a child, the way they are is how we are inside, literally at that
Yes.
same
Right.
moment,
Right.
And like when I get maybe a little bored in a restaurant, sure, I might want to get up and wander,
Right.
but like we're more mature, but that doesn't, we just need to give a lot of space for a child being a child.
Right.
And I think that plays into school, all the things. There's so many things telling our child to be still, be quiet, do this, do that.
Yes.
And children kind of need space to be a child.
Right.
I feel like
Right.
too. And now I don't know that that's going to be a wall plaque, but I do really feel like they just need freedom to be them and not be just squelched into what we think they need to be, what someone else thinks they need to be, what our culture thinks they need
Right.
to be. There's just so much pressure with all of that. So we're going to lean into kind of all the years. You have brought up two amazing, confident, independent young women.
Thank you.
And you have a son
I
who
do.
is amazing. And
Thanks.
I do want to touch in there. You had two girls,
Yes.
and you and Mark wanted another child. Can you kind of talk a little on that
Yes.
too? Because that's a
Yes.
part of parenting.
So, yes. So we have two girls who are 13 months apart. They are now 23 and 24. But when they were tiny, 13 months it's a thing. And
Drowning in diapers.
yes. And so we just took a breath. And when they were about 6 and 7, interestingly, you think you've kind of got it all good and they're doing well and they're in school. And Mark and I both had a leading from the Lord that our family wasn't done.
Mm.
And so we just said, okay, like this is what we're going to do. And so pretty quickly got pregnant again. And just like, okay, here we go. But before that, we actually had conversation of we really want to have a son.
Mm.
And so I don't know if you know that there is a book that will tell you how to have a boy and how to have a girl.
Oh my goodness.
So,
You know what? Here, information overload.
right?
already.
So we bought it. Like instead of like just like, okay, Lord, you've led us to this. Whatever
Right.
child you give us is wonderful. It was like, no, we're gonna take control of this and we're gonna
Wow.
try, to follow this book that tells us how to have a boy.
That's
So-
part of parenting in a way. We want
Right?
to have control, to take
Yes.
care of all the
Yes.
things because it
Right.
feels more
Right.
okay. But we also
Yes.
learn we really don't,
Yes,
don't
no,
and don't
no.
have to have,
So so I found out I was pregnant. We already had a trip planned at the end of the summer.
to a gorgeous place.
And this is right. That's what I was going to
Yes.
say. It wasn't just like it was a huge vacation. We had been saving for about 5 years for an anniversary trip, and we went to the Virgin Islands. And we didn't just go to the Virgin Islands. We went to the island of St. John, which is the smallest one, and you can only get to it by a ferry or a private plane.
Wow.
Which we
So
did not have.
you did totally couple. We're
yes,
gonna like
yes, we're all in.
isolate.
And
Right.
so it was. We were like, okay, well, we're expecting, but it's newly, like still young, and I thankfully did not have all of the pregnancy symptoms you had. It was just pretty much, normal.
Right.
And we landed, and about 2 hours after we had got there, I felt like something was wrong.
Mm.
And if anyone, a lot more people than I have realized
Mm.
have experienced miscarriages. But
Right.
if you have, you know that there's a feeling, and it literally was like a pop, like inside, the same feeling as when I had given birth and water broke, and that exact same
Wow.
feeling.
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, oh gosh, something is really wrong. And so for the next few hours, like this was in the evening, all night, like I just
Mm.
was laying in bed, crying, praying, and
Mm.
obviously like losing this baby. And Mark was sitting up in a chair the whole night, praying over me
Ah.
and reading scripture. And by the morning, we decided I need to see a professional.
Right.
So, but we are on like a tiny little island. So all they had is a clinic.
Ah.
And so we went and saw someone, and she said, yes, you've actually already
Oh.
lost this baby, but you're going to need some medical treatment. And
Mm.
so
in this gorgeous
this
location.
beautiful, beautiful
The
day.
conflicting.
And did you know that they have ambulatory boats? So
no.
I was in a gurney on a boat going across to the main island.
Oh.
And
So they're already treating you, maybe IVs or something on the way.
IVs,
Right.
mhm.
Wow.
Get there. We go in through the ER, which is packed with people,
Oh.
to kind of a room off to the side. 6 hours in this room.
Oh.
All day long, we're in this room, kind of. And
Here you're in
they're
paradise.
They're
and-
coming to check on us and find, and we're just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And Mark's
Right.
like, let's go home. Let me just take you home. And then this gigantic, dark skinned man walks in the door, and it was like a breath of the Lord came in the door with him, and he was like, I've got this. I'm going to take care of you. And Mark and I both have still talked about that it was just overwhelming
Wow.
of the feeling of the Lord's presence in that room when that man walked in. And
I
he
call
was our
those
surgeon.
God
and,
sightings.
right?
And a hard moment. Wow. God sightings.
And
wow.
to this day, like it felt like he filled the doorway coming in. He was such a gigantic man.
Wow.
And so it just, I ended up having to have a DNC and staying overnight and those kinds of things. And there were so many times when the Lord carried us through that. But on the backside of it, coming home, there was a lot of anger and a lot of sadness and even depression. Almost a year of that, of me just trying to figure out what happened? Like,
Right,
we're
right.
people that seek the Lord. We're people that trust in him and felt like he was telling us to do this.
Mm.
And then I got into a Beth Moore Bible study that's Breaking Free, which
Mm.
I don't know if anyone's done that. But it felt like the Lord was just like, I told you this. I told you to trust in me,
Mm.
but you chose to lean on your own understanding, which is
Mm.
a very familiar verse from Proverbs 3 of
Right,
just,
right.
um, and coming through all that and just actually asking for forgiveness of just like,
Wow.
there was a huge misstep that we made by taking information and not wisdom of the Lord. And
Mm.
um, so we got to a point where we were just like, okay, maybe we're done. Maybe we're just
Right.
going to trust where God leads. About a year later, we're pregnant again. And this time it's with our son.
Was that scary at first? Like,
Um,
will we lose
it,
this one? I don't know that I've ever
it,
asked you that.
a little.
Mm.
I don't think we told anyone until we got past the point
Right.
from the other one. And there was a little bit of that, and I'm sure every mom that's had a miscarriage, you have this thought of like, oh, there's another child
Mm.
that's gonna miss out being part of our family, and
Right.
he or she would be this old right now, and my
Right.
son that I have now would have a sibling that would have been much closer in age than his
Wow.
sisters, who are 10 years older than him.
Right.
So
That's wild when you think of that. Right.
yeah, it just weirdly enters your mind at strange times. Like when you see your kids running in the yard and playing with the dog, and you're like,
Right.
oh, there should have been one more of you here.
Right.
But we'll be reunited,
Yeah.
later in life. And so, but yes, so at 42 and 46, we had a baby.
I love that so much. It's keeping you young. I
It's
know.
it
So,
is it's a thing, and it's great, and it's been wonderful and fun, and he's adorable and easy. And interestingly, we did not talk about this ahead of time, but I asked him last night about my
that's
mothering.
so funny. We're both
Yes,
like, okay, let's
yes.
ask her.
And he was annoyed by the question, first of all. He's a
That's so
14-year-old
great.
8th grade boy that is like, what? Why are you asking me this? And then his answers were home cooked meals, and you get
Mhm.
up every morning to take me to practice. And
Wow.
so when you
Those
said
average.
the average day, like I
Yes.
was like, okay, he just picked average things that
Yeah.
he appreciates. And
You're
so,
you definitely we don't compare in life either. Like as
no,
parents or people, we have different gifts, but I literally I home cooked meals aren't necessarily my favorite thing to do. You are awesomely gifted with that. But somehow our children have survived
right,
and but Rick also does step in and that doesn't mean I haven't, but it's not necessarily
right,
my
right,
favorite. But
right.
people do kind of need nutrition to
Yeah,
live and
yeah, yeah.
all my children are in their 20s now, but wow. Well, I kind of want to jump back to the baby part. And
Yes,
first of all, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story,
right.
even with loss, because I do know with my mom, they miscarried before me,
Hmm.
but she always told me, she said, Lisa, I wouldn't have you
Right.
if because that was a loss. But
Yes.
she really, that was kind of my first take on loss and miscarriage because of hearing that from her.
Right.
And so I just really appreciate that. And even walking through it is loss and even that
Hmm.
anger and even the strand in your story of, we saved for 5 years for this.
Right.
And then how are you supposed to enjoy anything after that? It's
Right.
just
Right.
heartbreak in the
Right.
middle of this gorgeous play. I've always thought of that with your story.
Well, actually, we didn't even tell anyone at home what was happening
Oh,
because
wow.
um, Mark's parents were dealing with, his mom has had Alzheimer's. And
Right.
so that was a thing they were dealing with. And my parents were babysitting the girls. And I just thought, I don't want them to
Right.
have this extra
Emotion and
stress while
right.
they're doing these other things. So
Yeah.
we just chose to not say anything to anyone. We went back to our resort. We spent the rest of our vacation.
Right.
It was much more subdued, week,
Right.
then, we didn't do excursions or anything like that, but we just kind of sat in awe of where we were and how we did feel like the Lord was with us and carried us
Mm,
through that, even though it was a terrible loss.
right, right. We may need
So,
to do a full program
yeah,
on all
right.
that. I may have you back for that, but I do want to jump to, okay, you're in the middle of, you have two children, two girls back to back,
Hmm.
and you're like, we're surrounded by diapers and feeding
Yes,
our children.
yes.
The nutrition again is a key element,
Right?
all those things. And so one thing I thought of, I can't help but bring this into the mix a little. Nowadays, you and I, when our children were little, we didn't have our phones.
Right.
Where nowadays, I literally sometimes, I heard recently like a child say, I hate Candy Crush
Oh, right.
because I've never played Candy Crush, but like I know the concept,
Yeah.
but because they see the back of their mom's phone, they're
Hmm.
not seeing their mom's face. And I couldn't help but think of, the times even like feeding my children, whether you're, bottle feeding, breastfeeding, whatever. I really would sit there. Sometimes I might read if they fell asleep,
Mm.
but I remember even when we brought our daughter home from
Right.
China, I remember looking in her eyes, trying to find the middle because she has these
Oh.
dark, beautiful eyes. And, I really tried to seek praying in those moments
Hmm.
because I'm like, the rest of the day can be very
Yes.
full and doing and
Yes.
going. But those moments are so rare. You feel so tired in the middle of the
Hmm.
night. You feel so worn out, just going, going,
Right.
going, keeping up
Right.
with just doing the mom things. And then, I did make an intentional choice to focus on them in
Hmm.
those moments. I'm sure I didn't every single time because
Right.
sometimes I'm sure I
Right.
dozed off a little bit, But, I really was either praying. Sometimes I would maybe sing a song like,
Hmm.
I always loved like Jesus Loves Me or different
Right.
things like
Right.
that, and just quietly singing for them. But that's kind of where I went as a parent. Some moms would be like, I can't sing that. That's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Maybe some parents might read scripture, try to memorize something. Some
Right.
might read. I actually, with our oldest, I knew very little. I not no I didn't know anyone with a baby, and so I
Oh.
literally was trying to read about like different things like nursing and like growth
Yeah.
spurts, and
Right.
trying to
Right.
be like, okay, well, why are we in a new stage? Oh, 6 weeks they might eat more because
Hmm.
they're growth spurt. And so trying to learn the flexing and all
Right.
that sort of thing. So, but you kind of had a lot going on, and then you reached
Yes.
out. That's actually how we had known each other before that. I
Hmm.
think we had gone for like a walk, maybe down by the lake or something before, connected a little, but you reached out, wanting to do a play group.
Yes.
Because as a mom, we can feel kind of isolated
Right.
sometimes.
Right.
We're at home. Now,
Right.
some are juggling, working outside the
Hmm.
home. And then, taking care of their child. But you were looking for community, not just for
Right.
your child, but I
Yes.
think
Yes.
some for your mental well-being
Right.
too.
Yes.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I
I'll
just,
never forget that phone call. I
oh,
literally
it's
remember
so
where I
funny.
was standing in my house
Oh,
when you called. And,
that's funny.
sometimes we have these
Right.
little
Right.
snapshots, but
Um, yeah, so with two so close together, 13 months apart, it is a thing.
yeah,
It's a lot,
that could be a
and
whole nother program.
it's a lot. And then even we felt like even grandparents that we had in town really could not handle both of them.
Oh, right, right,
Even either physically or just mentally, like because it just there was a lot going on with
right.
two that little. And so I guess they were maybe 2 and 3 probably by the time we decided to start the play. Maybe not. Maybe they were just 1 and 2. But um, I kept telling Mark, I was like, I know there's other people that are in this situation that are stay-at-home moms with
Right.
their kids, and we're all just trapped in our houses
Yeah.
because we're tied to eating and naps and all these things. And if I can just kind of work it a little bit, for a couple of hours for people to get together and play and let the kids play together and socialize with some other kids and then also see some moms that I want
Yeah.
to befriend. And a lot of that was even, again, going back to the choices that we make. And I intentionally chose some people that I felt like I agreed with their lifestyle and their parenting, and I wanted their kids with my kids, and
Right, right.
those moms with me, because those would be moms that I would run things by,
Right.
and I would appreciate and trust their parenting. Maybe not exactly the same as mine, but I knew they had a similar mindset.
Community. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times Rick and I will talk about like core values.
Yes,
even
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and so we did do play. I still have like crafts that different moms have different gifts,
Yes.
and we would kind of rotate between
Yes,
homes or like the park or something. And I remember one of the moms did some kind of plaster thing. I'm like, kudos to her, because that was not my, thing. And like they did like a handprint and different stones or things, and I still have that.
I have it
because
too.
that-
I saw it in the garage the
I
other
love
day.
that. And I think you declutter more than I do, so I don't feel as bad, But I do. I love just how each home kind of took. Someone was out more in the country, and we did like a hayride one time in the fall, and I think we literally did a float in our little town's parade one time with our playgroup. We gave our group a name, and so yay, moms who come together. I haven't even thought of that in years. So, but I just think that's an important thing to kind of throw out there, of community. And again, you don't have to agree on all the things, but it's just similar thinking and values and coming together. And do you have any thoughts on, we could probably talk for a million hours on this, which would not go well, but any other thoughts on like baby, just kind of that time period? And even toddler, moving into some of that.
Right. So, more toddler or preschooler age. I thought of something the other night of just, again, going back to that verse in Proverbs of trust in the Lord and do not lean on your own understanding.
Yeah.
So the girls were just off, is the best way I could say. They kind of were just misbehaving, not in like a non-childy way, like they were children, but there was something about kind of some back talk and some different little things that I thought, I'm not really sure what is happening here, because I feel like I've been consistent in it. And so I was praying about it, and strangely enough, the Lord said they need to stop watching Disney Channel. And I was like, that is so specific and so strange.
Wow.
Every kid this age watches Disney Channel. Like, there's some great shows on there. And it just kept coming up and kept coming up. And so finally I just said to them, I was like, we're going to turn off Disney Channel for a month. And they were like, what? And I said, we'll come back to it. We'll see about coming back to it. But for right now, we're just going to turn it off. And it felt like that was the most bizarre parenting move at the time, because it was, that was kind of the main channels that little kids would watch. And so, so we did that, and it caused us to spend more time reading, going to the library, kind of doing some crafts. And looking back, I think it was actually probably more for me, because I was letting the TV kind of babysit them. And there are still times that happened. We just chose different things to put on. I need, 10 minutes to do this, or I needed to get some chores done or whatever. But I look back on that, and I think that was a lot more for me to be an intentional parent than just that Disney Channel was the bad thing. It wasn't.
It could have been whatever channel.
Whatever.
Now there are more channels, but
there's a million different things. But the fact that it was so specific and so directed that I felt like, if I don't do this, I think I'm going to miss something here. And so I just was like, okay, let's do this and just see what happens. And it was a huge difference. And then we slowly added some of the choices from there back in. And so.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because we ditched satellite at one point, because where like we just similarly
Mm,
of we don't there's no cable where we live, and so we ended up thinking, the stuff we are watching a lot of the time are on VHS anyway, like
right.
Veggie Tales or Little Einstein. Like there are certain things
Right,
we
right,
loved, that were just great. And Adora was a big thing. Like all the Blue's
right,
Clues,
right.
was we tuned into some Disney Channel. But anyway, it was kind of similar. And I love that you brought up that word intentional,
Mm,
because that there are two things in any relationship. And here we're talking about parenting, but we either drift
mhm.
or we're intentional, whether it's marriage, our family, our children.
Right.
And so Rick and I a lot of times would talk about drift and or what are we choosing intentionally.
Mhm.
And in the middle of parenting, those average, I love how my son mentioned the average days, because we can easily drift when it's
Yes.
average. I think of, I'm not a boat person, but like if we're going a certain direction, you want to keep going a certain way, make some intentional
Right,
choices
right.
about your what we're going north or whatever, because if you drift, well, you might get close to rocks and the
Mhm.
shore and bottom out or something,
Right. And you just end up going whichever the way the wind
Right,
blows.
exactly. And the Bible talks about that
Mhm.
even being like
Mhm.
adrift on the waves and, all that. And so intentional is just really key. And I also love when we don't know what to do. I know you've chosen this. I have, of literally praying about the
Mhm.
simplest thing. It
Mhm.
might seem simple, but it's really not, because it
Right.
can affect our daily life and the life of our child. And I do also kind of want to bring into the mix, there is some pressure with parenting. Some people have come out of very traumatic
Right.
situations with a parent. There's all kinds of trauma from how they
Mhm.
were treated or not treated. I know Rick is really there's stuff about like when you have high love and low discipline or low
Right.
structure,
Right.
high discipline and structure, and low love. When you have low discipline, low love,
Right.
and when you have high discipline, high love. And some of I think I actually had to write this down, because like high discipline and rules and low
Mhm.
love, those are the people who rebel. Most of those people are in prisons, like when
Oh
they've
my
looked at
goodness.
studies like that, the high rules, low love. A little better is no love, no discipline, which is sad because that's
Right.
heartbreaking too. Spoiled is that high love, no discipline or rules, just hey, do whatever.
Mhm.
And then that stable and thriving, literally, is high love and the high discipline or
Right.
structure or rules. You really need both, that love, that emotion, that connection. And I want to throw in the mix too, like one of my favorite things when my children were younger. When they're older, there might be some, but not really. It changes when they're young
Right.
adult. Just that snuggle time,
Oh,
because
right.
humans do need connection.
Yeah.
And literally, I remember maybe sitting and we had this big recliner, and I would try to have a basket nearby with like a burp cloth and maybe wipes and a diaper, a
Mhm.
bottled
Right.
water, maybe a
Right.
book, you know, uh, just different little things there, maybe even a granola bar, something,
Yeah.
because if a child fell asleep, I'm not always going to get up and just take them to their crib. I was not
Oh,
like,
right.
for me, I was just like, you know what, I can sit here, and I would even maybe have like something nearby to work on or read. And I'm like, that's okay. Or another child might come up and sit on my lap here. And
Right.
and
Yes.
just those moments are
Right.
very precious to me,
Right.
because and it seems like you're like, oh, worn out,
Yes. Yes.
but those are just very special moments and very key because
Mhm.
of just that connection, that safe space, that
Right.
nurturing, that just a peaceful space
Mhm.
too, because life can be a lot about going. And I something else we kind of decided intentionally is to be pretty specific on what activities we did. We did
Yes.
not overschedule, because we
Yes.
saw when we did that was not a good thing for our
Right.
children or us. Or we really made some specific decisions. For
Yes.
us, it maybe was one sport they were interested in, or to encourage them just to try one. Because when they're
Mm-hmm.
little, you're still learning their interests and all, of
Yes.
music was a big thing to us. So we ventured into that, a little children's choir at church, or there was like a Bible memorization thing at church, but fun
Right.
activities
Right.
and things.
Yeah.
Library story time, we
Right.
would sometimes see each other there too, and those were special things. Reading was a big thing too. Even in those moments where the baby might be asleep,
Mm-hmm.
I could like have a child's book nearby, just grab and read Goodnight Moon or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
Pat the Bunny, whatever, over again with my other child here. Then they get enough attention where then they're down back on the floor playing again.
Yeah.
But they've soaked up some love from mom
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. And we've got two arms.
Right.
Some people have
Right.
more children they can pile on. But those are, how did you guys, do you have any tips on just kind of,
So, I would have probably just put everyone in everything all the time. Just go, go, go. My husband was much more of the one that kind of
Mm,
just pulled in the reins a little
mm,
bit and said, let's just pick one thing and let them do that and try it and step in, try it, go to
it's
the end.
good.
If you don't like it, let's try something else.
Right.
So we've done that with our kids, but I'll tell you, my sister's family is completely opposite. They have 4 kids and they are all in multiple sports
Wow.
and they do
Yeah.
travel and everything. But her son, who is the same age as my son, they love to be together, but they're very opposites. Her son is like he thrives on the going and the doing and
Right.
loves all
Right.
the sports and loves all the activities. And they have great time in the car because a lot of times they have to divide and conquer. So one or the other will go with a different kid on a weekend
Right.
together and they have 4 to 6 hours in the car just with that one kid.
Right.
And when you have a bunch at home, time with just one
Yeah.
makes a difference. And so that's what works for them.
Yeah.
And so we've chosen different paths
Yeah.
and
And
kind
it's
of
different for every family.
yes.
And, I
And
love
even
what you,
different children inside your
exactly.
family. Yes.
That's very true, because just even the person, because I didn't know any parenting, and when you're growing up, you kind of see you and your siblings are different,
Mhm.
but you're still kind of you're not thinking analytically. Maybe some people are. With me, I was just like, woo.
Yeah.
But as a parent, you realize, okay, this child needs this. Sometimes a child might act out or whatever just because they need a little more mom time or dad
Mhm.
time, or
Yeah.
that one-on-one, like especially after a baby is born, or something. They If we feel something, they feel it too. Like we
Mhm.
might be able to kind of keep it from them when they're
Right.
younger, but they sense. Their children are so smart. They're
Mhm.
not
They
dumb,
are.
and they pick up on things. So even reassuring them, whether it's a storm or whatever it might be, whether it's an actual storm like the thunder, the
Yes.
lightning,
Right.
or the or like a life storm, and walking
Yes.
through that
Yes.
of whatever, and just walking that through that with them. One thing also that helped me. This is so simple, but I felt like even if I didn't do anything else that day, and this is average, but I at least would change my clothes out of my pajamas.
Oh,
And
that's funny.
and like
Yeah.
maybe even put lipstick on.
Right.
And here I was with my children at home. But that just kind of helped me mentally.
Yeah.
For some like
Yeah.
do my little quickie morning routine. Literally, I would be brushing my teeth, and my oldest would be maybe putting stickers on my vanity. But I still would do that quickie
Right.
little
Yeah.
routine.
Yeah.
And I felt it just helped me mentally
Right. I
launching
think
into the
ours
day.
we had a coffee table that the lid opened, like it was like a trunk sort of in our living room. And once the kids were in bed, all the toys went in the trunk
Oh,
and the lid closed.
smart.
So our living room looks like a living room. It didn't look like a playroom like it had
Right.
all day long.
Right.
And so even if it was, 9 o'clock at night, all the toys went in the tub, and we're like, okay, let's just sit here in this room that
We don't
is
compare,
picked.
but you are a better woman than I am.
Oh, that is totally my husband. It was really him. It was not me. But I was like, I'm fine to do that for you because
We've
that was
talked about
just
that, right?
visual clutter is kind of a
Right,
thing for him. So I'm like,
right.
okay, let's just whoosh, it
I
all
was
went in
thrilled
the
if we could get
bucket.
like puzzle pieces just to even back on top of the same puzzle thing. And I
Right.
did have like organization for stuff, but our living room was just all out. It was a capital letter living room,
Yes. Yes.
where it was the playroom, it was everything. And we were okay with that. We had VHS tapes, but Rick and I were joking for 7 years. We probably it was all out, just
Yeah.
play.
Right.
We had carpet at that time. And even when we brought our daughter back, she wasn't crawling yet. She was a year old. And so having that carpet, like she began just kind of, so
Right.
she was
Yeah.
doing her thing crawling. And then one son would be like playing with this and trying to, where will this ball fit into? And where, and then the other
Mm-hmm.
one is maybe drawing off to the side and drawing Bob from Veggie Tales. And then we also had like crafts, just age appropriate,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And I do love that. But I love that you just like threw everything in. We sometimes joked about just having a big broom to sweep it
Right.
off in
Right.
the corner. So, as far as like even elementary school and things, I want to touch on just energy. Children can be high energy, and I think we need to. I kind of touched on it before of there being children, and
Yes.
that's not a bad thing. And I think children really need to know they're okay. And then there are so many things going on. There are children even with special needs. You throw
Mm-hmm.
that in the mix. No one else knows how they should be loved and things
Right.
better than that parent. The parent
Yes.
knows their child, and like we said, even praying, asking God for wisdom on
Mm-hmm.
things. But another thing, just with energy, I feel like we need to be okay with children being children
Yes.
and give them space, not break their spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Let them explore life, enjoy life, run around with joyfulness,
Yeah.
and we want to do that as adults. Like
Yes.
we'd love to just run through the field and be like, woo, but let our children do that,
Mm-hmm.
and but then also, and sometimes publicly we might be like, okay, pull it back down a little bit, but why? Honestly, it's okay. Let our child enjoy life and I'm not talking about don't have boundaries, but just
Right.
letting
Right.
them because it really can squash a child as a child and
Yes.
throughout life.
Right.
And because we know adults too who are also, still feel inadequate,
Mm-hmm.
still feel they're not worthy, still feel um just they're not confident because of whatever went
Yes.
on
Right.
as a child. I will tell you a big thing, and some of this is because my parents did this with me. I think I really I never wanted to be disciplined publicly,
Hmm.
and I cringe when I hear children being disciplined publicly. And we chose to do that with our children, to discipline privately. And
Right.
other people might be like, well, you should. I remember
Right.
someone saying, you should spank your child for that. And that was not the offense. Like, if that's your go to for all the things,
Right. Right.
we were big on, okay, is there a defiant heart with this?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this just being a child?
Right.
Or is there
Right.
what's going on? How are they feeling? And I can't help but think sometimes Rick and I were like, and you can't always do this in the moment. You kind of have to step back for a minute.
Right.
Sometimes, like if a child's reaching for a hot stove,
Oh,
yes, you
sure.
got to
Sure. Right.
boom, get on it, walking towards a street. But would I want to be talked to that way publicly?
Hmm.
I would probably just be in tears in Walmart if someone was like, "Rah, rah, rah," to
Yeah.
me,
Right.
a parent or my husband or a friend,
Right. Right.
anyone. And so if it would make me cringe and crush my spirit as an adult, part of me is like, do we want to do that to our child?
Hmm.
Because
Yes.
are they even hearing when there are other people around? and we're being told something loudly and critically, and are we even hearing that in the moment? So that's just something we intentionally chose, is just to discipline privately. It takes more effort.
Right.
Getting down on their level. We were even talking about that of, when a parent is like over their child. Some parents, and even my husband, he's taller than me. I'm like, can you come down to my level?
Right.
Sometimes, with saying something, because it comes across differently. I'm shorter, and it's like, it's more foreboding if you're like, could you, but for a child, literally getting down on the floor, hey, do you know that maybe hurt your brother?
Right.
Or we don't want to throw that because, whatever, or be gentle with your baby sister or something.
Right.
And then I also think even playing, getting down on the floor, because sometimes a child will be like, someone might be like, they feel like their child is at them, like, mommy, 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 mommy. But sometimes if we just get on the floor and play with that, I like what you were saying earlier about doing a craft with them and the reading. And sometimes all it takes is something short like that, of reading a book, getting down, playing, with that, building that little Duplo or Lego thing for a little bit, playing the musical instrument, whatever, and then they're fine. They're at peace. They just need that connection. And sometimes we're like that as adults. So much of it is just a human thing. They're just littler,
Right.
But I kind of was riffing on a lot there, but just kind of, I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that thing. But
I guess just mostly, I think just letting them be themselves, and um, let them have a voice. That was my
that's
thing with
good.
my kids, was like, if you have some thoughts about something, I want you to tell me. I want you to feel like you have a voice in
Right.
this family. And their voices were very different because they're very different personalities. And I have one that's so full of energy, and at 2 years old, she was trying to put her own shoes on, and I reached down to help her, and she just said, "I do it." And I was like, I mean, she is 24 now, and
Right.
still like, I'm going to do it. I'm
She's
going to
doing
figure
it.
it out. I'm like, okay, you go, girl. And so, but to be able to like let go even that early with
Right.
her, and just say, when you're ready for some help, I will just help you. I won't do it, but I will
Right.
help you. And so I still feel like, even as young adults,
Yeah.
I still have that conversation with them. And I have to control myself in those conversations of not just telling them what to do or doing it for them. I have one daughter that just graduated last spring, and she kind of panicked to stepping into like adulting and apartments and leases and car insurance
It's
and
a lot
all the
all at once.
things, and
Right.
picking out her health insurance from her new job, and just,
Wow. Right.
she actually said, I need your voice in this. I need
Right.
your input because I don't know how to do it. And so, but instead of just fixing it for them,
Right.
again, you just say, well, let me just guide you here, and then you
Yeah.
can see how you can do it. And
Rick
so,
is really good. He's taught me like to say, because you can't always just jump in. Your heart wants to help, and
Right.
you're just like, and I would want help probably in some situations
Right.
too. But just asking, how can I help? I'm here to help. And I think that's so good, because that's through the teenage years. And
Yes.
I think you and I both, like, we also, I saw my parents do this gradual independence. It started
Yes.
when for some when they're two,
Yeah.
with their shoes,
Right.
and they're probably going to leap out further. And so, like, our
Yeah.
oldest was like that. All three of my children have gone off very far to college and things, and they, our children can do these things. Like,
Yes.
they really can, but I think it's also important to come alongside and say, we're here. We believe
Right.
in you.
Yes.
And if they do mess up, to not be like that finger in the face of, I told you,
Right. Right.
that is so harmful.
Right.
and just letting them mess up, giving a lot of
Right.
grace, a lot of
Right.
bandwidth, because I mess up every day
Right.
and
Right.
I'm not a young
Right.
adult, you know?
And sometimes those choices that they make
Right.
have caused harm to them.
Yeah.
And you have to go back and say, how, what do you see in this that
Yeah.
you could have done differently
Mm.
so that that doesn't happen again?
Right.
And also, I'm so sorry that happened.
Mm.
It's this weird fine line of there were some choices in here that you need to look at.
Mm.
And then also, I'm really sorry that you're hurting in this. How can I
Yeah.
help you in that? And so,
That's so good. And I think also riding it out with them when they've been hurt, when
mhm.
it's not their choices.
Yeah, that
Those
too.
things are so heartbreaking, almost even more, because you can't change
hmm
what happened, the
Right,
circumstances or people.
right.
Our oldest son had to speak up for something when he was treated a certain way by someone else, when
Yeah.
he was younger. And but we were there supporting him and encouraging
hmm
him, but we knew it needed to come from him, addressing that
Right,
issue. And,
right.
you're there and you support and believe in them. I do also kind of want to touch on the apologizing to our child, because
Oh,
that is something that I've heard from so many young people through life, or even our age. They did not have a parent who apologized.
right.
And it really sticks with them to this day. But for us, Rick and I intentionally, it almost feels like, oh my goodness, really? Do I need to apologize? But they need to see
hmm
we know we were wrong. Like when I would say, I am sorry, mommy talked like that,
Yeah,
or I said
yeah.
that. I was tired, and that's not an excuse. I
Right,
shouldn't have
right.
responded that
Yes.
way. And even as young adults apologizing. I said something a few weeks ago, and I had no idea that it was received a certain
Right.
way. But I'm so thankful. I think a big thing is just keep the communication lines open.
Yes.
Even when there's a lot of broken between parents and children and their parents, both ways. But I think just keeping the communication lines open,
Right.
meet them where they are, take them out for coffee, take them out for
Yes.
lunch, just whatever. And I kind of want to jump back to also, there is hope in the mess, hope
Oh,
along the
sure.
way,
Absolutely.
even when you can't see the finish line.
Yes.
There's so many moments neither of us saw the finish line ahead, but it's an everyday walking through things. I think of there's a verse in Isaiah I love where it talks about how God literally gently leads those who have young.
Yeah.
Ah, and I loved that. It just meant so much to
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
that we're not alone in that. Like, we have to choose to look to God, but He gently leads us. And
Mm.
we need that as parents too. We need that grace and that. I do also want to let me see. I want to make sure. One thing I want to touch on also, a priority for Rick and I know for you and Mark, and for a lot of families, is instilling something about faith. For
Yes.
us, we would each night pray with our child, encourage them to talk to God. That's what praying is.
Right.
And those were some precious moments, hearing them talk to God, and reading something from God's word together. I will say that can also go a little off the rails.
Oh, right.
I will never forget, we literally had read the story about David and Bathsheba,
Oh
which is where,
gosh.
if you're not familiar with the story, King David, back in the Old Testament times, sees a woman bathing
hmm
on a rooftop. She's married. He calls for her, has her brought to the palace.
hmm
They are together intimately and get pregnant. And then it's a whole thing where literally later he sends her back. Well, then they learn
Yeah.
she's
Right.
expecting. Her husband's off at war, so he's not the one who got her pregnant. So then King David brings the husband back. The husband is so loyal to his troops, he won't sleep with his wife. He's
Right.
sleeping
Yes.
outside, but she's pregnant, so you can't
Yeah.
sleep
Yeah.
outside of the house. And so then the king has to say, okay, well, send him back up to the front of the line, have everyone pull back,
And let
and her
him be
husband was
killed.
killed.
Yes.
So all of that, and so I think it was just touching on part of that story when our children were little. We didn't get into
Oh,
all of that.
right.
And so then our oldest was like, so daddy and mommy. And so you give age appropriate things about
Right.
like an intimate relationship
Right.
between,
Right.
a man and a woman and all. And so Rick did talk to him a lot, but we're like, oh, really? We were just doing a Bible story. Why do we have
Right.
to
What in
go
the
into more
world has
detail?
happened here?
Fast forward
Yes.
even later. And then our younger son one day said, they never give out coloring sheets at Sunday school about David and Bathsheba. We've always just been dying about that. But that was a prior. But the thing is, they
that's
got
so
it.
funny.
Like
Yes.
even
Yes.
when they have a moment like that with humor, or even hearing how I've not done well as a mother from my my younger son last night, they still get it. They and even praying. I have a nephew who was born with heart issues,
Yeah.
and I remember we would pray for him. Our children would pray for him. And
Right.
one day I got a call in the car. We were almost home, and it was a call about good news with a surgery from my nephew.
Yeah.
And I told my children in the back seat, guess what? He's doing okay. And we prayed, and
Yeah.
God
Right.
answered. God doesn't always answer. We didn't know all the time if my nephew would be okay
Right.
and if we might lose him or something. But my youngest son saw a rainbow outside. He
Oh.
said, Mommy, look, God answered our prayer. Look
Oh.
at the rainbow.
Oh.
And it's moments like that. You're just
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, in the middle of the mess. And when you really feel like you're not hitting all the things, you're not like, did they have too many chicken nuggets? Did they watch too
Right.
much TV? Did they, whatever the case might be,
Right.
was I too short today? It is those, like literally, okay, now I'll probably get emotional, but literally my son saying it's those average days and they do add up. And average isn't bad. We
Right.
just need to be intentional in the average. And I just, they do get these things along the way. Couple final things that I
Yeah.
also want to touch on. And we might still jump into some things here, but some of the things that I feel like with Rick and I, we were intentional. We tried to be. Now, this isn't 100%.
Oh,
No
right.
one's 100%.
Right.
I feel like with my brain, I'm all over the place sometimes, but just to be there,
Right.
to encourage, to love. And also, you touched on children being each so different, but also each of them is a different. I'm not always the best with figuring out a love language, but just loving our child in their way. It might be more time. I think all children need time, but time or physical touch or gifts or whatever it might be. There's
Yeah.
something that is important to them. Diving into their interests when I might not be that interested.
Right.
My younger son, he's very working on a project. I am not oriented, thinking that way. He is, but I love to hear my children's passions. But that's a choice
Right.
to dive into that with them. Your children have different interests too.
They
One of your
have.
daughters is a nurse. You're not a nurse,
No.
and but you dive in and you explore those interests, and that's part of loving them.
Yes.
And I think another thing is just literally saying, I believe in you,
Right.
because no one else, they might not hear that from anyone else.
Right.
They might, our world is there's so much, whether it's toxic or not encouraging, that's coming at us every day.
Right.
And even more so for our children because of, so much out there online and electronic. It's a great resource, but it's also a lot coming at us that you're not good enough. You should weigh this. You should look like this. You should be able to do this way. You should be great talking in front of people. You should be quiet at these times. There's just so many things that are just things coming at us of you got to be athletic. You got to be. We can't do all those things.
Right.
That's not their gifting or even our gifting. But to say, I believe in you. Some parents are freaking out because their child doesn't have a job.
Right.
the whole living in the basement thing, which also doesn't have to be a vilified thing.
Right.
There are seasons of life where I nowadays it's hard, like the younger generation, Gen Z, to step out into that. It can be very difficult, depending on the cost of living in an
Right.
area. It is different than when we were all starting out.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and so I think to give space and dignity, I talked to one mom recently, they redid an area that was meant for her parents. And
Oh.
actually, their son stepped into that. They gave him a different entrance.
Oh,
It was like
that's
in
great.
their
Yeah.
home, but they dignified him and never were like, when you going to get out and, all
Right.
that sort of thing. And I think we just need to kind of encourage our children to work. Now, I know there can be okay, well, they're just sitting around all day on video games, but, a lot of young people are not like that. They're not
Right.
sitting there. They really do want a purpose. We all do. We all want to do something. Um, I think another thing is saying, I'm in your corner.
Yes.
And because we can feel very alone. There are times I've felt like I'm just in a corner by
Yeah.
myself too.
Yeah.
And whether we get there mentally or literally, and just saying, I am with you. I am in your corner on this. And I also think celebrating their life, not just on a birthday, but just like
Yeah.
celebrating their gifts, their interests, their special needs even. There are
Right.
so many
Yeah.
opportunities for people out there now where they can plug in, and if something doesn't exist in that way, create it.
Right.
Just
Right.
let them create it even. But do you have any thoughts on just other practical helps, for hope in the mess?
Right. So, I think interestingly, when the world shut down for COVID,
Mm,
my oldest daughter had already gone away to college and she came home.
mm.
My second daughter was a senior and classes ended. And so,
Right.
and then my son was in third grade. He thought it was wonderful that everyone was home. But but
Right.
it was really an amazing time to see each of their personalities come out in
Mm,
that environment. And it had been a while since we were really all together
mm.
that much. They weren't at school, they weren't working a job, they didn't have any after school activities. And so just seeing a little bit more of who they were
Wow.
was really amazing. And
Mm,
I think it's like it's two sides. Again, it's kind of this balance of with them as they get older, growing with them and
mm,
watching them become the people that they are becoming
mm.
and let them become the people they're becoming, not keep them in this box of who they kind of have always been
Right.
growing up. But then also, Mark and I being consistent. We are the same people. We believe the
Mm,
same things. We're going to tell you the same truth
yeah.
all the time. We're going to tell you we love you. We're going to tell you Jesus loves you. And
Mm,
we're going to tell you we're here for you.
right.
And so,
So good.
so that was it was. I know it was hard for so many people. For our family,
Right.
it was really truly
Unique.
5 months of blessing and
Wow.
time together. So
Something, hearing you say some of that makes me think of sometimes we, as parents, delegate things to other people. Like, okay, well, the school educates,
mm-hmm.
the
Oh
whatever, maybe church or whatever,
yeah.
faith-based thing. They're the ones I drop off my child. That's where they hear about God,
Mm-hmm.
for a couple hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
But we delegate these things to other people, or even sports, whatever. The coach does that. But in regards to a relationship with God, if our child is only hearing that from other people a couple
Right.
hours a week, why would that matter to
Mm-hmm.
them? They need to see this is a real thing with mom and dad. No matter
Right.
what mom and dad have
Right.
walked through, some people have some rough stories of life, and then wow,
Yeah.
God gave them hope. They chose to
Right.
have a
Right.
relationship with Jesus, and that really turned their life upside down. And so they do tell their child things like, you know what, I used to be addicted to this, or
Yes.
I was broken in this way. But broken
Right.
doesn't mean we're not capable of
Right. Right.
impacting our children and other people. Or some people have felt like, you know what, I came from a broken home and I don't feel equipped as a parent, but some of them have been like, you know what, I learned what I want to be because
Right.
of that as a
Right.
parent. So I think that's something of being real with our children. That doesn't
Yes.
mean we have to hang all our dirty laundry out when they're 2 years old,
No.
6 years old,
No.
whatever.
Right.
It can be gradual
Yes.
sharing of our story or hearing other people's stories,
Mm-hmm.
but they need to hear from mom and dad. They need to have that time to really learn that they can talk to God. This is not
Right.
just a mom and dad thing, because I can't have a relationship with Jesus for my child. They
Right.
have to
Yes.
choose that on their own.
Yes.
My mom actually chose to begin a relationship with Jesus when she was a girl, and her dad told her, God doesn't have any grandchildren. He only has children.
Oh.
I can't,
Yeah.
it's literally, you have to choose to have that relationship. Just because your
Hmm.
parent, your mom or dad, goes to church or has a relationship with God or prays, that's each person's choice, and God
Right.
doesn't force that. But I love what you said. Jesus loves us, wants that relationship with us. And one thing that I loved from the time my children were little is the verses in Deuteronomy that talk about um, talking about God and
Mm-hmm.
all He's
Mm-hmm.
done along the way, when you are sitting down, laying down, walking along the road.
Right.
And I've added other things in of when you're in the car. You talked about your sister, and when they're in the
Right.
car, there's so many other moments now
Mm-hmm.
of when you're on vacation. That's not a break checking out from life. That
Right.
it gives you more time with
Right.
your child when you're on the plane or whatever it might
Right.
be.
When you're picking up from car rental line.
Exactly. Or not showing up in car in her life. All those things. It's like, just think the opportunities I would have had if I
Right.
picked him up
Right.
on time. Oh, my poor child is scarred for life. He will never miss picking up his child,
Oh,
I'm sure.
that's so
And
funny.
things like that, honestly, some of those things do hurt because, I was like, I wish because you don't realize, okay, I'm a little late, and how it has stuck with my son. And you kind of, and I just touch on that at the end here of sometimes we have regrets.
Hmm.
Like, like even last night, I was like, because we were totally laughing, having a great time with that. But then I'm like, I do feel kind of badly that is the
Mm-hmm.
thing. And there's going to be worse regrets like that
Yes.
with our children. But there is hope because God offers hope. You
Yes.
look at that situation with David, and and then God even said David was a man after God's own heart. The Bible says that, and it's amazing that we can make mistakes, but God gives us another
Right.
chance. And those I'm sorry's and I love yous, and
Mm-hmm.
asking our children, please forgive me. You know, those moments are humbling, but they're healing.
Yeah.
And even, and then you can laugh about it later in life. So, Lisa, anything else you would offer?
This has been great.
Oh
Thank
my
you for
goodness.
having me.
Thank you for being here. I am so thankful for your friendship, for your wisdom, and sharing that with people today. And friend, I just really hope that you have been encouraged today, just having some hope in the mess of parenting. There's mess that goes along with it, but it's also so much joy. And even in the middle of some really tough times parenting, we can turn to God, ask for wisdom, and just have a whole lot of hope. So I hope you're leaving today encouraged, friend. I hope to see you next time on Thrive in the Mess.